you. I know I'll need water. I hope I don't kick it over. These aren't a lot of papers. They're just a lot of papers with big writing on them. First of all, I just want to thank, um, as everyone has and should, Glynis and Jin for inviting me into this. It's been a remarkable time, and so I'm just hugely grateful. So, what I want to share today is the process we used to turn the insights and relationships generated through the REC CSEA project into the beginnings of a sustainability plan. The core idea was to use Three Horizons mapping as an inspiration and to adapt it into a creative wayfinding process. I'll briefly introduce what I mean by creative wayfinding, outline that Three Horizons and our adaptations of it, and then walk through the workshop narrative, talking about what we did and why that was important. So work started from a simple challenge. The REC CSEA had already generated important knowledge, partnerships, and momentum. But the question was how to carry that forward in a way that could guide action. We needed a process that could hold complexity, include multiple actors, generate agency, imagine viable future, and identify practical next steps. I shouldn't cover this. Creative wayfinding is a practice for moving through complex change when there is no ready-made solution. Its premise is simple. When a challenge has no current solution, the work is not to manage problems better, it's to create new possibilities for action. There's a strong fit for this way of working with the REC CSEA project, and for three reasons. First, the entrepreneurship ecosystem for 2S LGBTQI plus communities is not a tidy system. It's shaped by fragmentation, uneven geography, differing forms of visibility and safety, institutional exclusion, and competing logics of value. The project was also not trying to optimize one existing program. It was trying to ask what kind of ecosystem needs to emerge for queer and two-spirited entrepreneurship to thrive on more equitable terms. And the work already had rich inputs, field reports, community knowledge, resource mapping, advisory insights, lived experience. What was needed was a process to synthesize these into a direction of travel and a practical portfolio, and a portfolio of practical next moves. The Three Horizons gave us the backbone for the process. At its core, Three Horizons is a pathway practice for transformation. It uses three overlapping areas of focus. Horizon 1, which is the current focus, the dominant way of how things work now. Horizon 3, an emerging future, that transformed situation we want to move towards. And Horizon 2, the transition space in between, where innovations, experiments, new relationships begin to bridge from the present toward that future. And although the workshop was designed with Three Horizons as its backbone, we made a decision to adapt the language to make it more accessible. So Horizon 1 became the status quo, Horizon 3, the transformed situation, and Horizon 2, that space of transition, including what we called bridging innovations. This mattered because it kept the participants who came together for the workshop focused on their experiences, their insights, the actions they'd already taken, rather than having to learn a conceptual framework and model during the session. To prepare for the workshop, we brought together a creative team to support that. And some of the members of that creative team are here in the room, and I thank them for all of the work they've done. They helped shape the process, refine the framing, think through how to convene the right group of people. And for the workshop, again, I see people in the room who are part of that. Participants were brought together from across the ecosystem, including entrepreneurs, community organizations, policy actors, researchers, and others. And it's with the goal of bringing multiple perspectives together on both the current system and those possible futures. So what did we do? The first was going in to name that status quo. And so participants worked with synthesized findings from the REC CSEA field reports, from the related policy materials, and then tested those findings against their own lived experience, personal and professional. As you all know, the ecosystem was seen to be, the status quo ecosystem was seen to be shaped by interlocking structural barriers, institutional rules, and economic pressures that make it difficult for 2S LGBTQI plus entrepreneurs and support organizations to connect and coordinate and thrive. Participants also named that these conditions reinforce colonial oppression and default economic models in which legitimacy and success are defined narrowly and often through extractive rather than reciprocal logics. What came next was surfacing that transformed situation. And in here, participants shifted out of problem analysis mode and using somatic and creative practices began to describe the future they wanted to move towards, not as a rigid endpoint, but as a way of creating a direction of travel. They explored what would be different in relationships, institutions, support structures, and ways of valuing entrepreneurial activity. This was important because it gave the group a shared reference point, something they could use to judge whether an initiative was genuinely helping to move the ecosystem forward. Once that status quo and the transformed situation were clear, the workshop moved into that space of transition. Participants identified initiatives already underway that might act as bridging innovations. Programs, funds, platforms, partnerships, and other efforts that could help move the system towards that transformed situation. This was a practical step. It made the progress or the process concrete by focusing on what already exists and what could be strengthened rather than starting from zero. Once those were identified, it was about assessing what's the transformative potential within within those initiatives and mapping them across a continuum. So participants physically mapped on a wall all these initiatives across across downstream, midstream, and an upstream spectrum. Looking at those downstream initiatives, which are those responding to the urgent needs and stabilizing people in the present. The midstream initiatives that were looking to build new pathways, improve coordination and connection across the ecosystem, and upstream initiatives that look to begin to shift the deeper conditions, rules, incentives, ownership, power, and resource flows. From there, um, the workshop moved from an inventory to a strategy. So rather than trying to identify a perfect solution, the participants developed a short list of 11 promising initiatives as a portfolio. The portfolio approach mattered because transformation rarely happens through a single intervention. It requires a mix of activities operating across a range of different levels and time horizons. Those things that stabilize that current reality, the downstream, the ones that improve the pathways and coordinations, the midstream, and those that shift the deeper structures upstream. So the outcome was not just a menu of ideas, but a curated portfolio assessed for their transformative potential. And the portfolio became a practical bridge between the workshop and a sustainability plan. Next, they asked a critical question: what would help these promising initiatives grow? And this led to this enabling layer described as the Action Lab layer, where participants identified the supports needed to accelerate progress. This step mattered because it began to translate the vision into action. It made visible the practical conditions needed for a sustainability plan to become real. What emerged next? And one of the key outcomes was a clear picture of the role that CSEA could play going forward. Rather than only delivering programs, CSEA emerged as a potential steward of conditions within the ecosystem. This is important because sustainability in this case is not just about continuing activities. It's about it's also about cultivating the relationships, capacities, and support structures that allow the ecosystem to evolve. So, I've now shared with you the outline of it. What I want to share with you next is a video from the workshop. This video captures the sense of our session together, the look, the feel, the moments that we experienced together. It was beautifully created by Katie Cutting, who was our videographer and photographer for the workshop. Before we watch the video, just some context. On the second day of our workshop, the status quo made itself felt in our room. The washrooms here at the hotel had been relabeled as general neutral for our group. We had also been told that another group was coming in and that this change needed to be okayed by them. Without informing us, the designations were changed back. And this sudden change surprised one of our participants who found a very different atmosphere out of the room on a break. I also have to say, after that, in the days that followed, there was great work done, Jin leading it with other members of the team to really follow up on this event and to push for deeper levels of nuance around accountability and relationship. And I thank for all of that. On the day, the incident had a significant impact on all of this. We took time to process and understand what had happened. And during this reflection, Jin shared a moving poem they wrote. Katie's video captures the tension between the transformed situation, the status quo, and our collective efforts to navigate forward.